Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. As we have fairly recently gone through the book of Romans, we might have left the book of Romans thinking that the Apostle Paul really has a low view of the body. As we got into chapter 6, he talks about the lust of the body in verse 12. He talks about the body of sin in verse 6. And then when we got into chapter 7, he talks about the law and the members of my body, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin, which is in my members. And then in chapter 8, he talks about the Spirit putting to death the deeds of the body. And when one reads such passages as they go through the book of Romans, one might conclude that the Apostle Paul had a very low view of the human body, especially the body of a Christian. Well, if we perhaps misunderstood what the Apostle Paul was saying in the book of Romans, we have it clarified for us in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Because in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul gives us an appropriate view of our bodies. You know, there's two different extremes that we might take as Christians when it comes to our bodies. One extreme would be that we worship our bodies, that we make our lives all about our bodies, fulfilling the passions and the desires of the body, always focused on the body, serving the body, making the body what life is all about. That's one extreme. The other extreme is to completely neglect the body, to mistreat the body, to abuse the body, to perhaps even sin in the body, thinking that the body's not that important in the first place, which was pretty prevalent teaching back in the first century with the Gnostics. But this view that the body doesn't really matter, that it's a very low view of the body. And we can fall into either one of those extremes and end up suffering spiritually because of it. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul is going to balance this view of the body and show us that yes, it is true that the body can lead us into sin, as he established in Romans, and that is a reality that needs to be dealt with. But for the Christian, the body can also be a means by which God can be glorified. And it's when we have the proper view of the body that we are then able to use the body to glorify God. And in the context here in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul is speaking to those at Corinth who thought that it didn't really matter what they did with their body. You know, food is for the body, and body's for food. The same thing is true with sex. You know, I can get involved with a prostitute and things like that. It's just fulfilling another desire of the body, just like eating food is fulfilling a desire of the body. It doesn't really matter. And Paul is really counteracting or tackling this wrong view through these various statements that he makes about the body. And one of the things that he says about the body is that the body is not for immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord is for the body. In other words, our bodies are not to fulfill our own desires and passions and things like that, but is to be utilized for the Lord. And our bodies are given to us as a gift for the Lord. Perhaps the more shocking statement there is that the Lord is for the body. That's something perhaps we don't think about a lot. The Lord is for our bodies. The Lord is going to work in such a way to benefit our bodies. The Lord is working in a way to actually restore our bodies and redeem our bodies and to make our bodies what they could be, fulfill their possibility. Which brings us to the next statement that he makes in verse 14. Now God has not only raised the Lord, but will also raise us up through his power. And so he is for the body. As a matter of fact, he's going to raise it up from the dead. He's going to raise it up in power. And he'll talk about that in more detail in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. But nonetheless, he's saying that our bodies are going to be resurrected. So that's a great thing. Our bodies are for the Lord is for our bodies are going to be resurrected. And then also he says that our bodies are members of Christ in verse 15. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? If Paul had a very low view of the human body, He would never say that it's a member of Christ. He might say that our spirit is a member of Christ. He does go on to say that we are one spirit with the Lord, but he also says that our bodies are members with Christ. There's a union between our bodies, the activities that go on in our bodies, and the activities of Christ here on this earth. In verse 17, he says, but one who joins himself to the Lord is one spirit with him. Okay. And then he goes on to say in verse 18, flee immorality. Every other sin that a man commits is outside the body, but the immoral man sins against his own body. So the body is something that you can actually sin against, which is an interesting thing. Usually we think that the body is something that causes sin, that leads us into sin, but you can actually sin against it as well. And Paul brings that out, and that's done through sexual immorality. And then in verse 19, he says, or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, that God himself abides and resides in the body? And as such, the body becomes the temple of God. That's a very high view of the body. We've talked about this in a previous devotion, that the temple was a very holy place, and to call our bodies a temple of God is to have a high view of the body. And then he says in verse 20, he concludes and he says, for you have been bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body. You can actually use your body to glorify God. And so it's not something that's a piece of trash to just abuse and misuse, but it's actually something that can be used as a great tool to glorify God. So all these different things, the fact that our body is for the Lord is for the body, the fact that our bodies will be resurrected, our bodies are members of Christ, that we can actually sin against our body, that our bodies are a temple, and that we can glorify God in our body. You put all that together, and we see that the human body is very important. And it is something that can be used in a very glorious and wonderful way when we think of it in the proper way. And so we should use 1 Corinthians 6 to really give us a proper view of our bodies and to realize the great potential that is there in our bodies. Yes, there's potential for evil and sin, but there's also great potential for righteousness and for glorifying God. And of course, that's the path that we want to go, and that's the path that Paul is pointing us to. So let's be encouraged to use our bodies in a way that glorifies God, and we have the proper view of our bodies, not exalting them too highly, but also not thinking too lowly of them, but utilizing them for God's glory and for God's purpose. So with that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.